improvise, adapt, and overcome.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the Carry On Podcast, SITREP edition. I am Brad Colbert, the Iceman, for the week of our Halloween, October 30th. We have a couple of interesting stories that have been noodling around in my brain, and I thought I would pass them on to you. And of course, as always, I'll be accompanied by a glass of brown liquid. First and foremost, we have the shocking announcement that the President of the United States has directed the Department of War, or is the Department of Defense, I can never remember, to immediately resume nuclear testing, which rippled throughout the world. And it was precipitously timed before a meeting with Xi Jinping. And it definitely had the effect, according to the do-outs from the meeting with the Chinese president. The administration had a lot of its agenda items ticked off. And I don't know if that was part and parcel due to the announcement by the president or not, but it obviously didn't seem to hurt. Now, we haven't had a nuclear test since '92. Most of the world has long since abandoned it. And just in case you were keeping score, there are 9 countries that currently possess nukes, at least that we know of. And to go down the list, we're looking at France, the United Kingdom, of course, the United States, Russia, China, Pakistan, India, North Korea, and Israel, although never publicly admitting to owning weapons. It's pretty widely accepted that they do, and we can talk about that another time. All of these countries have at least put their names on a nuclear testing ban. And since it's been 33 years since we have tested a weapon of that caliber, there is a lot of infrastructure that would have to be built back up in order for it to take place. But leave that aside for the moment, and let's just talk about some of the political ramifications, in my humble opinion. It's a bold move. It's brash. I think that this administration throws conventional wisdom right out the window, usually along with the baby and the bathwater. In this case, directing the Department of War to resume testing is right off the bat a little odd, considering they have nothing to do with it. It actually falls under the purview of the Department of Energy, and they have a subset of individuals that are designed to oversee tests like this, which, shocking, they were fired as part of the government constriction. So we would have to either hire fresh people or bring them back onto the payroll with an apology and a bottle of whiskey, most likely. Even if all of that could be put into place, we're still probably 2 to 2.5 years away from doing a test. Now, according to some sources, we could do a political demonstration in as short as a year, but to test anything with any metrics would take the better part of 2 to 2.5 years to plan for. The place that we would do it, of course, is the testing grounds in Nevada, which has also brought a lot of consternation in the political world because, hey, the governor and the representatives of Nevada want nothing to do with it. But newsflash, you don't have a choice. It's federal land that they would be testing it on, and it falls under the federal government's purview. But really and honestly, does anybody believe that there's ever going to be a detonation of this caliber ever in our lifetimes? I mean, just because the President of the United States wants something to happen doesn't necessarily mean that it will. And also, this president is bombastic, prone to impulsive statements and flights of fancy. So in all likelihood, it was probably done as a clapback to Russia for some of its recent tests, which we'll talk about here in a moment. But there's regulatory agencies that oversee the treaty, of which, oh, by the way, the United States signed but never ratified, and Russia de-ratified back in 2023. This agency makes certain that there will never again be an above ground, below ground, or water test of weapons. Notice they never said space, though, now did they? Now, is there a way to detonate a nuclear weapon in space with the equipment to test the effects and so on and so forth without causing massive disruptions to our satellite constellations that are up there? I mean, there is such a thing as an EMP. I don't have the question to any of these. I don't have answers to any of these questions. I'm sure somebody does, but be that as it may, sticking to the present, the treaty is designed to see that the world never does a test of these weapons again. In order to test these weapons, we would need a lot of preparation, and by doing so, it demonstrates our initiative to make new nuclear weapons, testing their capabilities. Is such a thing necessary in 2025? And truly and honestly, what is it that we are countering against? The nice thing about our weapons is that, at least when it comes to the nukes, the likelihood of using them is slim to none. We have this beautiful thing called mutually assured destruction, or MAD, where it's assumed that if our enemy fires weapons on us, we're going to fire weapons on them, and it's sort of a zero-sum game. So honestly, with the exception of doing almost but not quite testing and running computer simulations, especially with the artificial intelligence revolutions we have, do we really need a test? No, I don't think we do, and I honestly don't think we ever will, but I gotta say, it is a brilliant piece of diplomacy on behalf of an administration that, as mentioned just a moment ago, throws conventional wisdom completely out the window. I think that this sends a signal to our near-peer adversaries, i.e. Russia and China, that we're willing to play hardball. The United States has definitely taken a pacifist stance for the last 30 years, and hey, I'm the last person that wants to get into a fight, especially when intercontinental ballistic missiles are involved, but I do also believe in carrying a big stick, and there's no bigger stick in the world than a nuclear weapon. So all that to say, we're going to keep a close eye on this. Maybe it dies on the vine like so many of the things that the administration has come out with. Maybe it doesn't. But along the way, there's going to be a lot more media attention on this, and there's going to be a lot more organizations that are against it speaking out. Some of those that have spoken out most vocally are, of course, our good friends, The Guardian in the UK. I usually know where they slant, and I always take their stuff with a grain of salt. They also have TASS in Russia. We have Al Jazeera. There's a couple of independent news organizations that have been covering this story, all with particular slants. Some are looking at the political. Russia decided to take the tact of outlining the historical timeline of the United States above ground and below ground testing through the decades, and basically painting us as the warmongers, which is laughable in light of Russia's invasion of their neighbor, Ukraine, but we'll leave that one alone. I think that it's interesting also to note that Trump continues to use Department of War. As I mentioned, it's DOE that oversees these tests. The Defense Department or Department of War has launch chain of custody or chain of command, but testing, development, manufacturing, disposal, that's not the Department of Defense. It's DOE. But be that as it may, interesting story to follow. Just to sort of bookend it, I thought that as far as a foreign policy statement goes, it had the effect that it needed. It definitely shook things up, and it definitely got a response from several countries, many organizations, and that is not necessarily a bad thing. I don't think it'll ever happen. So that's my comments on that. Mr. Producer, Jason, my friend and confidant as always, is there anything that you would like to pepper me with on this subject before I segue to my next?
Yeah, no, I think that ultimately when it comes to this specific topic with Trump and, his loose lips is that, it falls in the category of kind of psyops to me. It's like you're just you're dropping a bomb, and in reaction to Russia's testing and everything that's going on with China and the proximity that he was with China while he was in South Korea, and the announcement of allowing them to build a nuclear submarine. I just think it it, it was convenient for him to say that at that time, and it caused waves, and that's
Yeah.
exactly what it was intended to do.
Yeah, I agree. And a lot of people have said, well, this is raising the temperature on a potential Cold War, which is a paradoxical way to phrase that, but let's let it sit. But I disagree. I really do. I think that if this was a different president, yeah, it would be inflammatory. It would raise the temperature, but it's not. It's Trump. So I think it was a throwaway statement in many respects.
Yeah, I mean, I could see that being true. I could also see it not being true. You know, I think time will, as it always does,
Yeah.
reveal the truth.
Yeah.
And just considering everything that else is going on, like with Venezuela and the escalation that's happening there, and you know, it definitely feels like there is a lot of inflammatory things happening that could become extremely volatile. And you know, so it's hard to say ultimately, but I think in this instance it was just hyperbole.
Yeah, yeah, I tend to agree with you. And as I outlined, the practical applications of such a directive are like are Herculean, to say the least. I just don't see it happening before he's out of office.
We are both Cold War kids, you know,
Yep.
and the dialogue that was surrounding all of that constantly, and the fear that was pumped into the American people
Yeah.
pertaining to all of that is very familiar. You know, this time right now is very familiar, and you know, look at nothing really ever seemed to happen
Right.
during that time, and so it does have the flavor of a Cold War.
It does. It does harken back to that time when you and I were growing up, and we still did nuclear drills. Duck and cover was the preferred way to protect yourself from an atomic blast.
I was just telling my daughter that same thing. I was like, because she was asking me questions, and she's 11, and I was like,
Yeah.
well, you know those drills you do for earthquakes in school? We did those about nuclear.
That's right. It's just so stupid because the only thing it would do is just let you kiss your ass before you were vaporized.
Yeah, exactly. It would just change the position in which you died.
Yeah. That's all. Yeah, no, a fair point. And it seems like it's a macabre subject to make light of, but listen, the only way that you're going to be able to get through a lot of this stuff is with a little bit of humor and a little bit of whiskey. So you can't take it too seriously. It's either going to happen or it's not. And becoming apoplectic every time this guy opens his mouth it's going to give people an aneurysm, man. You got to learn to look at the to look at the practical, read between the lines before you start having an aneurysm.
Yeah, because he's really a master manipulator, and the party has gotten exceedingly good at manipulating, the populace, and it's shockingly easy for them to do, and I think that. That goes back to everything that we've talked about before about how algorithms work, and how people are so divided, and how they're fed the information that they want to be fed, and and they just have a way of getting under the skin of a lot of people, and
he likes to troll.
That's
he likes
by
to
design.
troll people. Yep,
it's by design.
Absolutely. Well, let me talk real briefly about the Russian tests regarding their nuclear-powered cruise missile, which I can't believe that this has come to light because I've been following this story since 2018 when it first came to light. Back in 2018, or thereabouts, Putin announced publicly that he was developing 8 new strategic weapons. We're not talking tactical. These are strategic. This is designed to be, game changers on a theater level. One of them was a nuclear-powered cruise missile. And I was like, wow, that's funny because, we abandoned ours in 1964 in the 50s during the Korean War, and when things were really heating up with our Russian adversaries, and the Cold War was sort of in its infancy. We noodled around the idea of a nuke-powered cruise missile. In fact, we built one. It was limited testing. It was not used because of a couple of reasons. One, the optics of it were really poor. The fact that we would be flying something like that, it sort of went against the spirit of trying to de-escalate the arms race, even though it's sort of a pithy thing to say because nothing was de-escalated. But we also realized pretty soon that, hey, flying a cruise missile that is leaking radiation is probably not the smartest thing to be doing across U.S. soil. So limited testing, and the project, it was scrapped, but it worked, and it was a viable concept. So fast forward, this is not new. This initiative from Russia to develop a nuclear-powered cruise missile goes back to the 70s. They were looking at some of the things that we were doing, and they were trying to match us weapon for weapon, and this is where that came from. It was abandoned when the Soviet Union collapsed, and then back in 2017, probably before then, when Putin was probably going through a box of file folders down in the sub-basement level 2B, comes across these blueprints for this weapon and drags it back into existence through sheer force of will. And it had some bumps along the way. It was found out later that in 2019, 5 scientists that were working on it died. There was a horrific accident. All 5 of them died. I don't know the details of what happened that caused them to die, but they're dead. They were given a Russian medal for their bravery, a funeral, all kinds of tea and medals, and then they marched on to finish this project. And so it was revealed way back then. It did have a successful test flight fairly recently, October 22nd, if I'm not mistaken. And according to their sources, it flew for about 15 hours. Now, there's competing beliefs on what the power source is. Is it a ramjet or scramjet style engine, in which case it is littering the atmosphere with radioactive waste as it flies. I don't know where they're flying it, but this stuff, it's not a short half-life. It's going to be around for a while. The other thing is the practicality of such a weapon. It's not a game changer in the sense that, yes, it can fly for an theoretical unlimited time, but a couple of things. One, there's a lot of doubts about that. Is it truly able to fly in an unrestricted amount of time? And if so, what about all the other supporting components, the oils, the lubricants, and the hardware components? Can they handle operating for an indeterminate amount of time? The method of propulsion is definitely going to influence what the answer to that is. If it's a ram or a scram, or if it's a conventional engine that is just being powered by a nuclear engine, a nuclear power plant, I don't know. There are probably some smart people out there that are theorizing this. From what I've been able to read on the open source pages, there's basically 2 competing schools of thought, and the ones that I mentioned are it. Both of which still don't take away from the fact that although the nuclear power plant will run as long as its fuel source allows it to, which is theoretically forever, the rest of the components can't handle it. I mean, there's vibration, there's turbulence, there's shear. It's still an airfoil. It's still flying through the atmosphere. It's susceptible to all kinds of things in flight. But also, the longer it flies, the easier it is to track. whether that's satellite, whether that's terrestrial. And if you can track it, you can shoot it down. Now, if you want to try and use it as an ICBM, which is what they're, touting it as, then yeah, it's going to provide a challenge, a almost insurmountable challenge to a defender to shoot down, because it doesn't follow a traditional flight path. It is able to fly nap of the earth. I mean, we're talking 150 feet above the ground. It is able to move up, down, left, right, in all three dimensions, and that makes it extremely hard to shoot down. It makes it extremely hard to track. So in that sense, yes, it does change some things, but is it a game changer? I don't think so. And I think there's a lot of speculation as to whether or not this is even going to see mass production. Does this system, yes, congratulations on your test flight, boys, but is it practical? Is it sustainable? Can you field it? They're big bombers because it's almost an order of magnitude heavier than a normal cruise missile. It can't take it. It has to be fired currently from a ground-based launcher, which limits it. It would be a lot easier to fire it from a bomber or something that can be constantly maneuvered. Yes, it's going to be mounted on a TEL, a transporter erector launcher, which allows it to drive around, but it's still going to offer some limitations. So I don't know if this is necessarily that big of a deal, except for the fact that it's good red meat for the home country, the motherland. The Russian people are going to eat this up. Putin gets to stand up and publicly announce that he has this wonder weapon, and it's good fodder for domestic media consumption. But I think most serious military experts see this for what it is, which is, okay, that's nice. It's a bit of a novelty. Yep, it's going to give us something to think about, but how many of these are you going to field? Are they going to be nuclear tipped? Are they going to be able to be produced in numbers that present a realistic and credible threat? And I just don't know if that's the answer. In conjunction with that, he did fire a nuke-powered underwater drone / torpedo. Also, more for pomp and circumstance than anything else. I think that this is signaling that it is part of their nuclear readiness and their nuclear strategy. Remember, a couple of weeks ago, they challenged the world by testing their command and control, their readiness, basically doing a mock drill for their nuke forces. And it was probably not a bad thing. I mean, considering the fact that they are the people that I trust almost the least with a nuclear weapon. They come right after Pakistan and India. It doesn't bother me at all that they're making sure that the chain of command works, the communications work, that the lights turn on and the switches are lubricated. But as far as firing a ballistic missile, a nuclear-powered ballistic missile, or a nuclear-powered torpedo, it's really just pomp and circumstance, I think. But highly visible launch. And a lot of things can go wrong. When you're firing something like this, the potential for it to go high order, I don't think this one was live. In fact, I would be shocked if it was. But it can blow up on launch. It can have a lot of things go wrong. We've seen North Korea and a lot of its testing have accidents, and it would be extremely embarrassing for Moscow. So I think they put a lot of work into this and making sure that it didn't and that everything went right. But because it's so highly visible, there's a lot of political fallout. There's a lot of organizations around the world that are looking at this and asking, are we really doing this? Are we really starting up the arms race again? Because I thought, if I was keeping score, that Reagan pretty much buried this issue by outspending the Soviet Union and really forcing the collapse. I mean, that if you look at the history of the Cold War, it was not won as much as they lost. We simply outspent them. Capitalism is a better economy. I think it's a better system of commerce. And their socialist government, their communism, it didn't hold up, and I think they imploded, and that's truly what happened. So here we are, decades later. Are we really going to start doing this again? It's they suspended the strategic arms treaties that the rest of the Western world signed. They are basically proven time and time again that they're not going to cooperate with reductions, with any arms control treaties. They're not going to abide by them. And as evidenced by these tests, I think that it's apparent they're not going to anytime soon. It also sends a signal, especially in light of the war with Ukraine, that they are a threat to NATO and that they are still very much capable of defending their territory, defending their interests. It is in many ways forced posturing. I don't think that they particularly appreciate our continued involvement in Ukraine. I would assume that they would love this whole thing to be over by now, and any excuse that they can to show that they're still very much a first world power is not going to be wasted. So it's funny that this has happened, because it's something that I was interested in, 5-7 years ago, and it's now come into the popular press once again. And it's kind of I don't want to say it's a nothing burger, because although from a hardware perspective, it's still a weapon and it's still a pretty good one, but on a strategic level, is this really tipped the scale in any believable way? Or I don't think so. But well, we'll see. We'll see how many Chernobyls happen with more test flights.
Yeah, I agree. This kind of falls under the flex category, and considering everything that's going on in the Ukraine and how long that war has been dragging on, it was Russia's way of trying to make themselves relevant again. And I think the biggest problem for me personally, I think the biggest problem with Putin in the realm of nuclear firepower is that I believe that he could press the button. I think that he's very capable of doing that, and I think therein lies a big difference. I know that we pressed the button in Hiroshima and Nagasaki and all of that, but in these days and time, and you're looking at his control over the government, and you're looking at the kind of human and character he has, he definitely has the capacity to do it. And I think that of in itself is the biggest problem with all of this, the testing and whatnot. I don't think that it's imminent, but I do think that it's possible. And there is where the problem lies for me.
Yeah. But you brought up a good point. Our nuclear triad is so the command and control links in the chain are so carefully crafted that the risks of everybody throws out the Trump's got his finger on the button and I don't trust this guy and he can launch weapons. Like, no, it's actually not as easy as you think. He can't just open up the football and push a giant red button and the next thing you know, missiles are flying. There's a lot more to it, and I wish that people would stop with that nonsense. But the Russian system, from what we have been able to garner, is much less controlled. It is much more centralized. The U.S. launch capability is I don't want to say but it is decentralized. There's several people that have to coalesce in order to launch these weapons. The Russians, on the other hand, can launch with a lot less oversight and a lot less restrictions. And to your point, I believe that he, between the two parties, America and Russia, I think he's much more likely, temperament-wise, to use them. I mean, we're not currently engaged in conflict. They are, and they are the aggressors. And I think that he's much more likely to use it than we would.
Oh, for sure. And his rhetoric, is proof. I mean, he's threatened to use them, ad nauseum, and especially surrounding if NATO gets involved, and if the U.S. gets involved, and if all of the ifs. But we don't threaten to use nuclear weapons.
Nope.
That's not something that's part of our rhetoric, and it's very much a part of his. And again, we're back at the hyperbole thing, and we're back at psychology and how is that affecting the world and the posturing that comes with that. But I do think that he's off his rocker enough, or calloused enough, that he's like you said, it's not, it's so, it doesn't have the checks and balances in place to press the button.
Yeah, they have
and
very
where
centralized control.
Yeah, and that's where the problem is, and that's where, and again, I think that that's part of the response that Trump, had to him. He's like, okay, well, we're going to test ours. You're testing yours, and you're using this kind of language. I do think that it was, again, hyperbole, but it's all very strange to hear this all happening again.
Yeah, like I was saying, there's a lot of people that are sitting back and watching this play out and saying to themselves, Jesus Christ, what is this, 1980 all over again? Are we really doing this? Are we really going to ramp back up a Cold War that was over, and for a very good reason? It bore no fruit. All it did was scared the shit out of the free world. Spawned a bunch of great movies, though, so there's always that. Yeah, anyways.
We're back to the Red Dawn.
But I mean, what do you pick? You could do the morning after, you could do Red Dawn, you could do, Spies Like Us, and you can take this in any direction you want. And speaking of Spies Like Us, how do you like that segue? Let's talk about the Golden Dome for America, which, if you're a Spies Like Us fan, is a 2025 practical version of that movie, which in and of itself was based off the Star Wars initiative that Reagan wanted. The technology was not mature in the 1980s, and it is barely mature in 2025, but there's a very interesting startup that is trying to accomplish what Trump's executive order demanded, which was an integrated multi-layer missile defense system, including space-based elements, that would allow the United States to create a missile defense dome to prevent anything from attacking our soil. In a sense, we currently have something like that, but it is not as robust as what his executive order directed. Now, costs for this thing, wow. There are estimates. The space base alone is in the billions. I mean, billions. The overall system, many experts have theorized, is probably going to be around $1.7 trillion. Now, that's a whole lot of scratch. But hey, since we're writing checks that our ass can't cash anyways, who the fuck cares, right? Have you been to DC and seen the national debt clock? It's science fiction. Anyways, so in June, we had a Pentagon test of Alaska's LIDAR, possible Golden Dome components. And in August, we've been checking out Space Interceptor demos. There's a couple of prime vendors involved in this. I know that, what is the name of Lockheed Martin is one of them. Grumman, I want to say, is another one. And then there's this startup, this bootstrap company called Apex, and they've developed an orbital magazine, which I thought was really interesting. They're having a demonstrator up in space next year. It's a proof of concept. Essentially, what is going to take place is they're going to launch a satellite into low Earth orbit, and it's going to have a bunch of interceptors. Think of, they call it an orbital magazine because it has a magazine's worth of interceptors that will launch from space and intercept a ballistic missile, an inbound nuclear weapon, potentially non-nuclear as well. So the thing about intercontinental ballistic missiles is that the intercontinental part means that they have to actually scratch right through the bleeding edge of the atmosphere, and that's the opportunity at the apex, at the parabola, to intercept them and shoot them down. And that's what this product is designed to do. It's a Project Shadow is what they're calling it. They're self-funding. It's costing around $15 million of their own money. As I said, they're going to be launching next year, sometime around June. They're going to be demonstrating space-based interceptors. Now, these will not be live for this test, but they're going to at least demonstrate the command and control, thermals, hosting, and deployment. And all of that is going to be one piece of an overarching Golden Dome infrastructure. I think it's novel. I think that I mean, first off, I'm a huge fan of space, and I definitely think that it is, here we go with the cliche, the final frontier, or at least the next frontier. Putting our satellites in space since, the 60s has seen a proliferation of technology since then and counter technology. So we have anti-satellite missiles. They exist. It's a thing, and it is by many considered to be a first strike weapon. So as soon as a conflict is recognized or begins, the very first thing you want to do is you want to shoot down those satellites. You want to take down the communication satellites, the spy satellites, all of those things to blind your enemy on the battlefield and reduce their ability to command and control. So in addition to ground-based satellite missiles, they have space-based satellite killers. These are basically satellites that are put up there to destroy other satellites when that event comes. I think that this space-based magazine, this orbital magazine designed to intercept terrestrial weapons, is probably going to be targeted almost immediately. And I'm not the first person to think about this, so it's curious to know what's going on behind the curtain. What are the defense mechanisms that this orbital magazine is going to have? Is it going to be able to defend itself? And if so, how? I think that is absolutely the next battlefield for the planet, is controlling space, controlling your opponent's ability to maneuver in it, to project power through it, and to occupy it. So basically, this system, if it works, could be one of many components that comprise a Golden Dome. I hate that word, by the way. We need to come up with something else. But there's a lot of limitations. The technology is still not mature. We're talking a boatload of money, I mean, in the billions. And when you talk about products like this, the cost is infinitely higher to maintain it. The very first thing that you want to look at when you're fielding a new weapon system is not necessarily the lethality of the weapon. It's the logistics. Can we maintain it? What happens if it breaks? How do we repair it? What happens when new technology needs to be added? Now, I'm not just talking about firmware, but I'm talking about hardware. If it's a tank, if it's a battleship, if it is a gun, you just fix it. If it's something in space, you got to fly up there and you're going to have to take care of it in person. And that's exponentially more expensive. So I think this is exciting from an engineering standpoint. I love seeing private commercialization of space because NASA and other government-funded space programs have been abysmal. I am a huge, huge fan of us pushing out of the atmosphere to the moon, the asteroids, Mars, whatever the case may be. But right now, Earth has all of its eggs in one basket, and as we've been talking about all night, it takes some idiot with the ability to launch a nuclear weapon to pretty much eradicate the species. So I'd like to spread those species around as much as we humanly can. This is an interesting strategic capability, but here's the wrinkle. So remember earlier I talked about mutually assured destruction. Well, it only works if both sides are equally balanced. As soon as one side shows that they have a strategic advantage, it negates that status quo. It is no longer mutual. You have shown that you have an advantage. Now I am at a disadvantage. To eliminate your advantage, I may strike first. At the very least, I have to find a way to neutralize your advantage. And that is an arms race. When it comes to things like nuclear weapons, I think the whole planet has pretty much agreed that that's insane to have an arms race for nuclear weapons. Now, I'm very pragmatic. I don't for an instant think that war on this planet is ever going to stop. In fact, not 1 year in all of recorded history has the planet ever been at peace. Not 1 year. Yeah, a while back there was some theory that we had about, 50 to 100 years of peace. And that's actually was debunked many years ago. Between rival warlords, despots, tyrants, and your good old-fashioned guerrilla, we've been killing each other very successfully since we first crawled out of the cave. If we go up onto the moon and have a laser fight, I will definitely not be surprised. But until then, I'm going to watch this with excitement and apprehension all at the same time. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think it is. Again, it goes back to the '80s and the Star Wars thing and Reagan and all of that, and this is definitely where it's all going. And you start to look at even in more recent news with stalking satellites that Russia is putting up in China as well as that they're stalking our reconnaissance satellites, and that that has been going on for some time, but it seems to have resurfaced again in recent news. Yeah. And not just our satellites, but the UK satellites as well. Yeah. So space is the next frontier for sure. And
it is.
It's been, part of the dialogue for a long time, and now it's coming to fruition in accelerated rates.
I want to be able to walk into an old drive-in theater and have somebody wearing a members only jacket ask me if I would like a Pepsi. If I could have that moment, then all of this is free to play out however it wishes.
I still have a members only jacket.
Of course you do. Of course you do.
It's blue. And I will never get rid of it.
No, I don't think you should. I mean, that stuff is still extraordinarily fashionable. Yeah. I would like it if we could perhaps, galvanize all of this expansion, this aggressive expansion into the arms race in space to the colonization race. Like that is where I would much rather see our energies being directed. I like the idea in theory of a golden dome. And again, I fucking hate that term, but until somebody gives me something else, let's call it that. This missile defense system, I'm all for, but it's not practical. You're talking thousands of interceptors up there in orbit, and the cost is in the trillions. It's not practical at this point, but also, okay, what is the threat that we're trying to mitigate? I think that money could probably be better leveraged on terrestrial countermeasures instead of a space-based intercepting package. I've kind of gone back and forth. Like, I love the idea, and wow, the tech is really fucking cool, but gosh, don't you think that we could instead worry about other measures, countermeasures here terrestrially?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's always been the case. I mean, since when has practicality become a relevant thing when it comes to the industry of war,
Well, necessity
or
is the
for
mother of invention.
mankind?
I just don't see the necessity here.
Yeah, no, I think the necessity for it is farther away for sure.
Yeah.
And it has been part of our, collective conscious for some time. So it will come to fruition. It's just that, I do think that, it's a lot farther away than we think. And, as far as colonization goes, that'll be interesting to see what happens. Like, who's going to land on the moon first? There seems to be a new race for that. China seems to be pretty close
Yeah.
to getting there. And,
Yeah.
then we're talking about, okay, we're, the hot topic is, mining of resources,
Yeah.
and, you know, which is also part of the topic surrounding Venezuela.
Right.
And it's not just oil, so it's, you know, like you said, shooting each other with lasers on the moon, that's where that's going to go. It's like you're the race to exploit whatever the moon has to offer.
Well, and I don't even know if it's necessarily the moon. The moon is not a wellspring of resources. There's other more ripe areas, but what it does have is real estate. And it's an interesting thought experiment to have when we do colonize it. How do you define territory? Who is it recognized by? Is it recognized as international borders the same way that it would be down here on Earth? Do we have to come up with a planetary body that regulates where the borders are drawn on the moon? And I liked the Apple Plus series For All Mankind. If you haven't seen it, it's amazing, and you definitely need to see it. But everything we're talking about plays out in this show. How do you establish borders and then enforce those borders? And what are the consequences of enforcing them? And I think that I don't want to say it is unfortunate because, again, that's sort of trite, but it is sort of sad that this is the pinnacle of the human race at this point, where we pour this amazing amount of technology and we're deciding how we can keep each other from blowing us up.
Yeah, it is pretty fascinating. And, the moon in general is it's we don't know what kind of resources, mineral-wise and whatnot that is there. There could be a very valuable resource there. But I guess it would be more of a jumping off point or a port, a port.
Yes.
A port.
Yes.
For going to, Mars or whatever.
Yeah.
But, ownership is just so weird. It's like first, because we were here first. We own it. This is our section. And it's like, well, it's pretty big, so we landed here too. And all right, this is our section. And then it just gets weird. It's like it just gets weird.
I think it's going to get weird and wonky. And here's the beautiful thing about it, my friend, is that you and I are probably going to be in nursing homes by the whole time this whole thing plays out anyways. I love Musk's enthusiasm for getting folks to Mars, but hey, bro, it's not going to happen anytime soon. It's just not.
No, I mean, he has a hard time getting rockets out of the atmosphere,
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't see how you're going to come up with the resources to actually, because, getting there is one thing, you have to, there's a lot of infrastructure that has to go into place because it's not an atmosphere in which we can survive.
Yeah.
So
You're right. You're right. It's fun. So for the Halloween week, I think that was scary enough. We talked about nuclear weapons. We talked about posturing. We talked about space-based weaponry and intercept capabilities. And we will bring you another fresh round of debate, conversation, of course, my opinion at large next week, and then the first November edition of the Carry On SITREP edition. So that's all for now. I am Brad Colbert, the Iceman, and as always, stay frosty.
Improvise, adapt, and overcome.